My name is Giovianna Burrell. I'm the Communications and Culture Change Leader for the City of Albuquerque's Office of Equity and Inclusion. Our office was established to inspire and equip city government and our employees to be a national role model in working through race and social justice issues. And so, what does it mean to change and shift an organization's culture? So, to make it more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. It means quite a few things. One, it means a commitment to dismantling systems of oppression that create racial and social inequities. It also means taking intentional actions to develop and implement policies, practices, and procedures that promote culture change. It also means having a shared framework and language so collectively we can understand how to move forward and with culture change. This work isn't linear. It doesn't stop at one spot. It's ongoing. So it's really important to keep that in mind when doing race and social justice work. As the African proverb said, it takes a village. Not one person can do this, not one department or office or even city can do this work. And so it's really important to collaborate, share ideas, and also bring in the community to work together towards social justice and racial equity. What this requires, though, personality-wise, and some things that I've learned to embody in doing this work is you've got to be motivated. You've got to be hopeful. There are some times where it feels hopeless doing this work and really tackling large race issues, gender issues, and other systems of oppression that we see in our society. And so having a sense of hope, but also the courage and the passion to move forward and not giving up in this work. Also, thinking outside of the box, not looking at how to approach culture change from this one-size-fits-all model, but really looking at how can we plant seeds and normalize and educate people when it comes to racial and social justice issues. So it takes a lot of creativity, right? You may have heard or know of the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and what this means to have a shared language and shared framework, because that's really important in doing this work and shifting an organization's culture to be more social and racially just. So these words, you may see them come all three together. They may come in twos as our Office of Equity and Inclusion, or you may see them come singularly and they stand alone. So how would you define diversity, equity, and inclusion to a third grader? What does this mean? What do we really mean when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion? And are we all using the same terminology and definition when we talk about these terms? And so these are all really important questions to ask ourselves when we're doing culture change work, because to move forward, it's important that we're all on the same page so it doesn't lead towards misinterpretation or people having their own definitions that's not a part of the organization as a whole in doing this work. So let's do an example. Let's really break down these terms and what they mean. So I'm going to be using definitions from Generosity, which is a social impact nonprofit organization, and they created a glossary of 17 racial equity terms. And they use this in conjunction with Aspen Institute and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. So to start, I'm going to read the term, but what I'd like you to do while I'm reading it is just listen. What are some words or key thoughts or things that come to mind when you hear these definitions? And then we'll talk a little bit about them. So we'll start first with diversity. It's a multiplicity of races, genders, sexual orientations, class, ages, countries of origin, educational status, religions, physical or cognitive abilities, documentation statuses within a community, organization, or grouping of some kind. Diversity does not mean equity and inclusion. It's not a synonym for either of those terms. And so the key word that stands out to me in that definition is multiplicity, meaning diverse, various backgrounds. And we also have our own diverse backgrounds within our individual selves. So hold on to that thought about diversity. We're going to do a definition of equity, which says fairness and just in policy, practice, opportunity consciously designed to address the distinct challenges of the non-dominant social groups with an eye to equitable outcomes. And so in speaking of equity, it's really important to normalize conversations around race. And so in this, I will use an example. When we're looking at giving resources and access, it's really important to acknowledge that white people do have advantages and power when it comes to accessing certain resources within our society compared to people of color. And so it's really important when we're looking at these issues of race and social justice to look at it from an equitable end to make sure that everyone has what they need so they can fully participate. Lastly, inclusion, which means being included within a grouping, a structure, with an authentic sense of belonging. Organizationally, inclusion is expressed through practices, policies that empower employees across the board. So a key word that sticks out in inclusion is belonging. Do people feel like their voice is truly heard? Do they feel like they're wanted in that space? And so this is just a brief introductory example about how we can use equity terms and set a foundation for what we mean when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion, so we can all move forward. So looking at shifting a culture, it's important for us to say, we believe diversity, equity, inclusion means these terms, and when we move forward, we know what it means when we're doing our own work and when we're looking at it from that lens. So an example is, imagine that there's 3 circles, equally sized, and in each circle, one has the title and label diversity, another circle has equity, and the other inclusion. So when you bring those 3 circles together and they overlap, in the center, there's a space called belonging. So when people feel like they're being treated fairly, when they feel like they can show up in their true diverse background and the multiplicity that they come in, and they also feel like they're wanted and heard, that creates that sense of belonging. So when we're looking at creating a shared framework of what DEI, as we may have heard, our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, it really means we want to make sure we all belong in our organizations and institutions. And so this was found through the Turner Consulting Group, which is a diversity and education consulting group in Toronto. And so this is where they came up with the worksheet that will be linked in the website that talks about when you bring diversity, equity, and inclusion together, it means belonging. So I hope this example in my chat with you today gave you an idea of what starts culture change. What does that even mean? And why is it important to have a shared language and framework when doing culture change work as well as race and social justice work? So this is where we're starting here with the city of Albuquerque, and we look forward to sharing more about our culture change. Thank you.